All right, so our objective today, we're going to continue dealing with the relative frequencies, but we're going to focus in, bless you, on conditional. Oh, maybe I should say understand, huh? Objective is always an action. And we'll add understand and calculate conditional relative frequencies. And then the second part to what we're going to do is to look for possible assumptions in the data. So I think what I'm going to do today a little differently than what we've done is I'm going to front load you with what is a conditional relative frequency. And then we're going to go back to Kenisha's information from yesterday, the one about preferred sports and boys versus girls kind of thing. And then we'll actually find conditional relative frequencies, okay? So let's go ahead and write down a definition of a conditional relative frequency. Conditional relative frequency. Now don't forget, with the book online, we have so many resources where you can tap on those math on the spot videos, and you can go to the personal math trainers, and you can get extra practice. So even just in this book, you have a ton of resources that you don't need to go seek out in the other websites that we've been using, like Schmoop and Virtual Nerd and Khan Academy. Okay? All right. This is going to sound weird, the definition, but as you see it in play, it'll make more sense. So conditional deals with a particular condition. So what we're going to focus in on is one of the squares that would be normally in the joint relative frequency section, where it's having an intersection of two variables, meaning a girl liking basketball. And then we're going to compare it to one of two things. We're going to compare it to all the girls that voted, or we're going to compare it to all the people who chose basketball. So we are choosing a condition that are related to each other, okay? Just my printer doing things. So conditional relative frequency compares a joint frequency, let me say joint relative frequency. Sorry, having a hard time today. Let's try again. So, girl choosing basketball to a condition related to that. Which would be either all girls or all people who chose basketball. So we're not comparing to the grand total, we're comparing to a total that's a marginal in the margins. We're going to choose one of those totals. So it's either going to be a total from a column or total from a row that relates back to the original condition. Okay? Patrick?
But wasn't also the total number of people surveyed a marginal relative frequency?
Yeah, but this one is dealing with what relates back to this joint relative frequency. So if I'm looking at a girl who likes basketball, the only two totals that I can look at is total girls or total basketball. Okay? So I'm not going to be looking at the corner one, which is everyone who was surveyed. It has to be related back to the original condition. Okay? So there's a relationship between what column am I pulling my original value from, and what am I comparing it to? Now remember, with comparing, it's going to be a division process. Okay, so we're going to divide. And again, we can get a fraction, which then we create a decimal out of by doing division, and then we can turn it into a percent. Okay, so again, what we're going to do is use Kanisha's example. We'll go back and put in her chart, and then we'll go and do all the conditional relative frequency, so you can see that being done out. So let's go to the next page. And so remember, with Kanisha, we have gender. We had basketball. I don't think I make one chart up the same way twice. We had football. We had soccer. We have total. And this is preferred sport. Now, again, if my memory is correct, I don't remember if Kanisha had a condition on this. Let's see, she surveyed about sport preferences. So again, we don't know whether these are preference to play or preference to watch. Okay, so I don't even know that much because it wasn't specified for us. Under gender, we've got girl, we've got boy, we've got total. Fill out the rest of our chart. And just like we were doing yesterday, we're going to put the raw data towards the left of each box so that we can show calculations towards the right. So she had 6 girls who preferred basketball. There were 14 boys who preferred basketball, for a total of 20 people who preferred basketball. There were 12 girls who preferred football. We had 20 boys who preferred football, for a total of 32 people that preferred football. For soccer, the girls really seemed to like soccer. We had 18 girls, 10 boys preferred soccer, for a total of 28 people who preferred soccer. Now, when I total up the girls, there were 36 girls who participated in the survey, and when I total up the boys, there were 44 boys that participated in the survey. When I take 28, 32, 20 and add them together, I get 80. When I add 36 and 44, I get 80. So all the numbers mathematically work out. Okay. So in the conditional relative frequency, what we want to do is we're going to look at girls and who like basketball versus people who like basketball. So we actually have 2 conditional relative frequencies that we can calculate for each one of these. So if I do girl and basketball, so girl and basketball, and I want to compare it to people who like basketball, I would be doing this calculation. I would have girl and basketball is a 6 out of 20 people who liked basketball. Okay? And if I do that, I end up getting, of course, they don't have all my numbers here. I'm going to have to do it all myself. So this would give me, let's see, multiply 5, it'd be 0.3, which would equal 30%. Okay? Now, if I wanted to do a girl who chose basketball and I wanted to see how she compared amongst all girls, now my numbers change, right? It's 6 over 36, which equals 1/6, which is, oh, what's that calculation? Hold on a second. So we have 6 divided by 36, which is going to give us a repeating number. So we could say that's about 0.167. And this is what I noticed on these, is they do seem to round to the nearest tenth. So that would give you about 16.7%. And that's how they would go about doing all these calculations. Okay? So if I wanted to compare to all the girls who chose basketball to everyone who chose basketball, I do the first set of calculations. So I used this total and that joint relative frequency. Or that's not really joint, but that joint category of girl with basketball. If, however, I wanted to do girl with basketball compared to all the girls, now I'm going to do the calculation that direction, okay? So what's not my denominator, as it was yesterday, is that 80, because that's everybody every time. So we want to make sure that our calculation with the conditional relative has to do with a related condition, either relating to the gender or relating to the sport, okay? So let's do a couple different calculations here that they recommend in the book itself in example 3. And let's see, let's go to a different color. So for example, let's say, and I have to tell you these are probably the most convoluted directions I've ever heard. So you're going to have to wade through to see what are your two comparisons. So this is what I heard. It says, find the conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed prefers soccer, given that the student is a girl. Okay? So find the conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed prefers soccer, given that the student is a girl. So what they did for a girl liking soccer, and then they compared it to girls. So they said a girl who likes soccer being a girl gives me 0.5, which is 50%. Okay? So of the girls who voted, half of them chose soccer. That's why it was such a big, I was really surprised by that, how many girls like that. But again, that makes me wonder if this is playing. Girls don't really want to play football, okay? They may like basketball, but they really prefer soccer. Seems to be a sport that more girls like to play, okay? All right? What if they want us to do, you know what, let me erase. Oop, no, he's good. I'm going to see if I can delicately erase this stuff. I'll go back and put in the lines. Okay. So the next situation says, okay, find the conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed is a girl, given that the student prefers soccer. Okay. Find the conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed is a girl, given that the student prefers soccer. So we're looking at girl with soccer, and we're comparing it to people who prefer soccer this time. So that would say choose these two values. We want a girl who likes soccer compared to people who like soccer. So in that case, we get that number to be about 0.643, so that's rounded, which would give us an answer of about 64.3%. So right there, that tells me that more girls like soccer than boys like soccer, because we were comparing to total people who chose soccer. So percentage-wise, there were more girls that chose soccer as their preferred sport. Okay? So this is where we have to really listen to the language. So I'm going to write down a couple of these so that you guys can see this, so that we can understand where to come up with these connections.
On the test, if we get like 64.7, do you want us to round it up or keep it like that?
I will probably say leave your answers to the nearest tenth if they don't work out evenly. Okay. I think we can just use that as a default when it comes to percents, is instead of rounding it to the nearest whole number, which really often dilutes the result. So if we just say let's just leave it to the nearest tenth, then we'll always do that. Unless it terminates, and then we're good. Okay? All right, so let's write down a couple of them, and let's see if we can come up with that. So let's look at I'm looking for some good ones here. Okay. Looking at our chart, in fact, I'll go back. Looking at our chart, I'm going to give you the exact words and see if we can find out. We're going to find the conditional, relative, oops, maybe if I put the words together, huh? Relative frequency that a student surveyed is a boy given that the student prefers basketball. Okay. So what do you think that we would write here? What would be our fraction that we would be creating? Now you can tell me in words and then we can put the numbers in. Okay? So what goes in the numerator? Bam. What goes in the denominator? Okay, Maggie?
And the numerator would be boys who like basketball.
So boys who like basketball.
And the denominator would be total boys. Something.
Okay, would it be comparing to boys or would it be comparing to basketball? So find conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed is a boy given that the student prefers basketball. And here's where you have to listen to that word student. When it says student, it's now talking about where the total goes. So this one says student prefers basketball. Does that mean the total of boys or the total of basketball? That's the total basketball. So this is our key phrase, is this word in the phrase is student. Student means the totals on the bottom that go with the sports. Okay? See, this is a little tough. That's why we have to kind of practice it. So we would have over the students who choose basketball. So if you put it together, what would you get? What would be the numerator number? 14. And what would be the denominator? 20. Okay? And this actually works out real nicely. What percent is that? Yeah, this turns out to be 0.7, which equals 70%. Okay? So I think that's going to be our key, is that we have to, given that is going to be our denominator, and then we need to say, look, did they mention student or did they mention gender? If they mention gender on that one, they say given that the boys, that it's a boy, then they're going to go with a 44. Okay? So let's see if I can find another one to write down. I'm trying to find if there's another one for this one. We'll have to do it for a different one, I think. Okay. So, working on the idea. Let's talk about why do we do this. And the whole point behind this is to try to make some assumptions. So, again, continuing on with Kanisha, her real reason for asking the kids these questions is she wants to know, does gender influence what type of sport people prefer? So that's our question we're trying to answer. Does gender influence what type of sport people prefer? So this is the question we're going to be answering. Alex, you got to write it down. From the chart that she gathered all that information on. So number one, we're going to start with the girls. Okay, so number one, we're going to start with the girls in the survey. So first thing we're going to do is figure out the percent of girls that were in the survey. So if we look back at our chart, how many girls were in the survey? There were 36. How many people were in the survey? 80. So what we do is we take the number of girls in the survey over how many students were in the survey. This works out to a nice 0.45, which gives us a 45%. Okay? Next, we're going to determine the conditional relative frequencies of each of the sports. For the girls. Okay. So let's start with basketball. Okay. Now on this one, we're going to only look at how many girls chose basketball out of how many people preferred basketball. Okay, so we're going to compare girls to total basketball people. Okay, so the number of girls in basketball to the total for basketball. So looking back in our chart, total number of girls for basketball was? Total number of girls for basketball?
26.
Total number of girls for basketball? 6. Total number of people for basketball? 20. So we're going to get 6 over 20, which is going to be 0.3, which is 30%. Then let's do football. So again, we're going to choose girls who chose football over the football total. So looking back, the girls who preferred football were 12, and the total people who preferred football was 32. So those are two numbers, 12 and 32. Now after doing math, you would get 0.375 or 37.5%. Last, we've got soccer. So we want the girls who choose soccer over the soccer total. Okay, so let's look back in the chart. Girls who chose, oops, I went too far. Girls who chose soccer was 18, and the total people who chose soccer was 28. So we get 0.643, which is approximately 64.3%. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is take these 3% and we're going to compare them back to what we expected the results to be. If girls are 45% of the people surveyed, then they should be at 45% if there's no gender bias. Okay? Gender has nothing to do with what they select. So now we're going to compare each of them. So this will be our next step, would be to compare individual sport results to the percent of girls in the survey. Okay, so let me see, what color do we use? Green, blue. Let's start with blue. So for the basketball, we had 30% chose basketball compared to 45% girls. Okay, so we had 45% of the girls were surveyed, but only 30% of them chose basketball. So you would conclude girls are less likely to prefer basketball, or less likely than boys to prefer basketball. Okay? What was my next color? Let's see, what would I use with? Oh, purple. Okay, so, oops, I went too far again. Sorry, come back. So on football, we had a total of 37.5. So 37.5 choose football compared to 45%. So we would say girls are less likely than boys to prefer basketball. And then for soccer, we ended up with that whopping 64.3%. Choose soccer compared to the 45% girls. Hold on. So girls are more likely than boys to prefer football. Ooh, I did basketball twice, didn't I? This is soccer. And this should be football. Okay? All right. Good luck with the homework on School Loop.